Out, Out by Robert Frost. The buzzsaw snarled and rattled in the yard, and made dust and dropped stove-length sticks of wood, sweet-scented stuff, when the breeze drew across it. And from there those that lifted eyes could count 5 mountain ranges, one behind the other, under the sunset far into Vermont. And the saw snarled and rattled, as it ran light or had to bear a load. And nothing happened. Day was all but done. Call it a day, I wish they might have said, to please a boy by giving him the half hour that a boy counts so much when saved from work. His sister stood behind him in her apron to tell them supper. At the word, the saw, as if to prove saws knew what supper meant, leaped out of the boy's hand, or seemed to leap. He must have given the hand. However it was, neither refused the meeting. But the hand. The boy's first outcry was a rueful laugh, as he swung toward them holding up the hand, half in appeal, but half as if to keep the light from spilling. Then the boy saw all. Since he was old enough to know, big boy doing a man's work, although a child at heart, he saw all spoiled. Don't let him cut my hand off, the doctor, when he comes. Don't let him, sister. So, but the hand was gone already. The doctor put him in the dark of ether. He lay and puffed his lips out with his breath. And then the watcher at his pulse took fright. No one believed. They listened at his heart. Little, less, nothing. And that ended it. No more to build on there. And they, since they were not the one dead, turned to their affairs. So after reading this poem for the first time through, I can get a brief understanding of what this poem's about. So what I understood is that there is a young boy working pretty hard in his backyard, seems like for a good amount of the day, and then his sister comes out to the yard and tells him that supper is ready. Getting excited, the buzzsaw leaps out of his hand and cuts it pretty badly that he has to go to the doctor's for it. And they end up having to amputate his hand even though he doesn't want to, and unfortunately he ends up dying by the end. So that's not a very detailed explanation of what this poem is about, so I'm going to read it for a second time through, but I'm going to annotate it as well. So, the buzzsaw snarled and rattled in the yard. So obviously this whole poem is about this buzzsaw, supposedly. So I'm going to circle that. And many times throughout this poem it says that it snarled and rattled. So I'm going to note that. It made dust and dropped stove-length sticks of wood, sweet-scented stuff, and the breeze drew across it. So we see some alliteration with this sweet-scented stuff, all the S's. And from there, those that lifted eyes could count. Some more alliteration. And then those that lifted eyes could count. So whose eyes, I'm not sure who they're talking about yet, could count the 5 mountain ranges, one behind the other, under the sunset far into Vermont. So right away I can tell that in this section right here, in the beginning, there's a lot of imagery going around, and it's very sensual towards nature. So there's a little sensual tone going on. We'll see if that changes. And the saw snarled and rattled again, and snarled and rattled as it ran light or had to bear a load. What load it's bearing, I'm not sure. And nothing happened. So day was all but done. So call it a day, I wish they might have said. So they say call it a day. Who is they? I'm assuming their parents were saying this. To please the boy by giving him the half hour that a boy counts so much when saved from work. So right here, you can see that the boy is very overworked. Oops. Okay. So if the parents would have said call it a day before, then they would have saved from work and gave him more time to play. And then this is where his sister comes to him and says that supper is ready. So his sister is mentioned, a family member, stood beside her apron. So here, she was cooking. Got some gender roles going on there. Tell them supper. At that word, the Saul, as if to prove the saw, knew that all saws knew what supper meant. Leaped. It's another action of the saw out of the boy's hand, or seemed to leap. He must have given the hand. So given, I'm assuming the boy must have given his hand to the saw. So however it may be, whether he did or not, neither refused the meeting. Underline that. So, but the hand, the first boy's outcry was a rueful laugh. Seems kind of odd that he laughed if he got his hand cut by a saw. So I'm going to put a squiggly under there. Sort of. And he swung toward them, holding up the hand, half in appeal, but half as is to keep the life from spilling. So right here, the life from spilling, I'm assuming that means the blood from his hand. Then the boy saw all, since he was old enough to know, big boy doing a man's work, though a child at heart. He saw all was spoiled. So the blood that was spilling from his hand, he saw that it was too late. Oops. So right then he realized that it was too late to save his hand. So this is where he's going to the hospital, but he does not want them to cut his hand off. So don't let him cut my hand off. The doctor, when he comes, there's a sister again being mentioned. Don't let him, sister. So, but the hand was gone already. So again, with all being spoiled, it was too late to save his hand. The doctor put him in the dark of ether / anesthesia. Just a little note there. He lay and puffed his lips out with his breath. And then the watcher, not sure who that is, at his pulse took fright. No one believed. They listened at his heart. Little, less, nothing. And that ended it. So right here is where you see the death of the little boy. Nowhere to build on there, and they, since they were not the one dead, turned to their affairs. So here is a big line of the poem. So I'm going to put a square around that. So now that I have annotated this poem, I'm going to go back and try to interpret what I have underlined and circled to see what information I can get out of this poem. So right off the bat, we're starting off with a buzzsaw, what most of this poem is about, and it said that it snarled and rattled, and that is evident many times throughout this poem. And so there is definite personification. With the buzzsaw, and I think it's personifying it to be a wild animal, because snarled is a sound that a wild animal makes before it's about to kill its prey. So I'm going to, so the buzzsaw is a type of predator. I'm getting that's a predator of life from what I see from the rest of the poem. So mate dust traps in it. So right here, I bracketed this because it was a calm and sensual tone, which contrasts greatly to the rest of the poem. So down here, it is, it's very horrific and frightening as the imagery you see with life spilling from him and him end up dying at the end, so it contrasts greatly. And I think part of this introduces the idea that's pointed out here when it says, "From there, those that lifted eyes could count 5 mountain ranges, one behind the other, under the sunset far into Vermont." So the only people could see these beautiful mountain ranges are ones that actually lifted their eyes. So I think what this is saying is that farmers who are in this area don't usually take the time to appreciate the small beauties of life. So farmers or adults do not take the time to do this. They're too busy doing the other things that they need to get done throughout the day. So as we move on, again it repeats that the saw snarled and rattled twice as it ran or had to bear a load. But then nothing happened. It seems, this is seeming that the day was done. So this is evident that it's been a very long day for the young boy, and he was hoping that the day was done. And that is also emphasized right here when it says, "Call it a day, I wish they might have said, to please the boy by giving him the half hour that a boy counts so much when saved from work." So this is saying, as I said before, they're overworking the boy, and they're also denying him of his childhood. So they're making him work all day without any breaks. So he has little to no time to be a child and play outside and enjoy these the small beauties of life. So in that there. Then his sister stood behind him in her apron to tell them supper. So as I said before, there's some gender roles evident here. So the sister, a young girl, is working in the kitchen doing housework, I'm assuming, when she's not cooking, while the boy is outside doing yard work. So there's some gender roles, the contrasting gender roles there. And that word, the saw, is to prove all saws knew what supper meant, leaped out of the boy's hand or seemed to leap. So this knew what supper meant is more personification, and it is signaled by hunger. So it's saying that the saw has an appetite because it knows what supper meant, so it emphasizes the personification. And leaped is also, let me circle that. Oops. Another characteristic given to the saw. And it said, "He must have given the hand, however it was, neither refused the meeting." So this is saying that the boy didn't move his hand, so he must have just left it there, must just freely have given his hand, but like either way, he didn't refuse the meeting. So he must have freely sacrificed. So he freely sacrificed his hand because he didn't move it away. So, but the hand, the boy's first outcry was a rueful laugh. And I said this is confusing before, as you usually wouldn't think that you would laugh after you got your hand cut. But this goes along with that he freely sacrificed his hand. So he half knowing that he did this, so he laughed because he knew, and probably because it's been a super long day. So he was just overtired and he didn't really know what was going on. So as he swung toward them holding up the hand, half an appeal but half as if to keep the life from spilling. So this, I said before, that he saw that all the blood was coming from his hand, and eventually he saw all, and since he was old enough, he saw that all was spoiled, so he knew that it was too late to save his hand. And this right here says, "Big boy doing a man's work, though a child at heart." So this proves his loss of innocence. and child doing man's work. So then, being the child that he is, he doesn't want him to he doesn't want the doctor to cut his hand off, and he seems quite frightened by that. And that can also mean that he realizes how important he is to the family's survival, as he is one of the main people who has to do all the work in the house. So realize the importance of his hand. So now he's scared. But obviously he realizes that the hand's already gone, so there's absolutely nothing he can do. Then the doctor put him in the dark of ether, so he puts him under anesthesia while he lays there lifeless, puffing his lips out with his breath. And then the watcher. So this right here is curious because it is very impersonal. And it shows that the family was not present. So you'd think if a boy is getting surgery, that his family would be around him to just be there for him from some support, but they were not. And then is that no one believed, they listened at his heart, little less nothing, and that ended it. So no one believed. So they really didn't expect him to die. Maybe that's why they weren't in the room with him. But unfortunately, that ended it, so he did die. And this right here is a big part of the poem. No more to build on there, and they, since they were not the ones dead, turned to their affairs. So this shows that they just continued their life like nothing has happened. So there's a detachment there from the child, and it shows that, can you see this? Yes. That human life is considered insignificant. So this one line alone reveals one of the themes that I found in this poem, that when somebody dies, then their life automatically becomes insignificant, and that, like this says, the family just turned to their affairs. So they just went on with their daily lives and didn't bother doing anything else with the child. So now that I have that, I'm going to try to put this all together and get some themes. So one I already said was how human life is insignificant. Another thing that I'm noticing from these last couple lines is that death is an escape from human suffering. Why I'm thinking that is because not only is he in pain from having his arm cut and then amputated, so he is in pain from that, and also it would have been much worse for him to come out of it alive and then have to deal with his family and not be able to help his family with the daily chores and helping outside with his father, one who is not mentioned in this poem. So that also relates to why I boxed in sister twice. So sister is mentioned twice in this poem, but no other family member is mentioned. So that I can tell that there is a bad relation with his father. So the sister is the only member mentioned. So family relationships is like one of the smaller themes in this poem. So that can also emphasize why death is an escape from human suffering, because it would have been a lot worse for him to have to deal with his father yelling at him and feeling useless at home because he cannot help anymore since he only has one hand left, which is pretty useless in the work that he has been doing since he was a child every single day outside. So having a bad relationship with his father can also emphasize why there was detachment at the end when he died and his life seemed insignificant to them, but it didn't necessarily mean that they didn't love him anymore, but that death is escape from human suffering, but also the detachment and being insignificant is a way to cope with death, is finding indifference in the situation. So now that I'm done analyzing and interpreting what I have annotated in this poem, I'm going to go back to the title and see if that reveals anything else about this poem. So out, out, and then it has a dash at the end of it, which usually signifies that something is supposed to come after that, so that in my head rings a bell that obviously it is a verse that was in Shakespeare's play Macbeth, which originally said in the entire verse, out, out, brief candle. Oops, candle. So this, then, you can see refers to how short life is and how quickly and easily your light or candle can be burnt out, or in this case, death. Now this reveals a major theme of the poem, connecting to what I noted down here, that denying children their childhood is an unjustifiable act because life is so short. So I'm going to take a shortness of life, and that you never know when it was going to end, as is portrayed here in the title. So if I had to write an essay on this, I would use this theme that I just found, using the title and what I found down here in denying children their childhood. The rhetorical devices that I would use that I found most prevalent to support this theme is contrast in tone, personification, and imagery. So in contrast in tone, starting as calm and sensual, showing the beauty of life up here, down to horrifying towards the end, revealing how quickly life can end, and that you should take a step back and appreciate those finer beauties in life before it is too late, that it was shown up here in the beginning of the poem. Then, as the buzzsaw is being personified as a wild animal and a predator, allows all of the blame of the dreadful accident to fully rest on the saw, and as it says down here, the saw was the one that leaped and therefore cutting the hand. So, this further reveals that it wasn't the boy's fault, but rather it was the result and consequences of overworking the boy by making him do a man's work with no time to play or having a break. That was says up here, by overworking the boy. Finally, imagery helps to emphasize this consequence that I just mentioned and amplifies the seriousness of the accident, as well as the contrast shown in the beginning with a description of nature to emphasize this point, that they should appreciate the beauties in life. Therefore, all these pieces in this poem are utilized to create meaning by portraying that the consequences of forcing a child to do a man's work is not nearly worth it to deny them of their childhood and innocence because of it, and that is because life is too short and you never know when your last day will be. Instead, adults should learn from kids and enjoy the time that they are given by appreciating the little things in life before they are taken away from you. So that is my interpretation of Out, Out by Robert Frost.